I'm Jeffrey Marshall. I'm in my second year in the History doctoral program at Liberty University. I earned my MED in History at Westfield State University, which is in Massachusetts. My interest in this project likely echoes that of historians, philosophers, psychologists, moral leaders, school teachers, students at all levels of instruction, and the general public as we've all tried to understand how anyone could have passively stood by or actively participated in the Holocaust. I think it speaks to a primal need to try to explain and categorize away terrible things that happen. Like if someone gets cancer who's about the same age, we're prone to say, well, he smoked. We want to gain some relief from that psychic discomfort. My research question was just that. How could Germans and others passively stand by or even participate directly or indirectly in the Holocaust? There are the cries of never again, and yet we've seen genocide occur since in Cambodia, Yugoslavia, or the former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, and other locations. The approach to this research project was primarily textual, with first a review of the historiography. It included analysis of German documents, newspaper accounts, testimony from the Nuremberg trials, as well as first-hand accounts and oral histories. It understandably expanded into the realm of psychology and social psychology, looking at various experiments. The conclusions were that that the bystander archetype is really an oversimplification of a much more complicated phenomenon that was informed by multiple factors, including centuries of deeply ingrained anti-Semitism, economic factors, the law, the establishment in the medical and scientific communities in particular, propaganda, identity and group identity, a society with a deep tradition of autocratic governance and hierarchical leadership, group conflict, changes in the values, morality, faith, and social order in a time of chaos and crisis. Another conclusion that came as a surprise, that not only that there's this bystander myth, but there was an entire set of motivations and interests served by its proliferation. The Western democracies had known about the Holocaust, as did the Pope, and they did nothing, or not enough, to speak out or prevent it from happening. It hid the failures of denazification at a time when Germany was on the cusp of a humanitarian crisis. Its economy was in shambles. It was a risk in that it was unstable. And it was needed to take a seat as a Western capitalist nation in NATO because of the Cold War. Additionally, Germans had an interest. They could not face the guilt over what they had done and freely admit it. They viewed the Nuremberg trials and other acts of justice like denazification as victor's justice. They believed they too were the victims of both the war and the German Reich. They could point to the actions of other nationalities and participating in genocide like the Poles or the Lithuanians or the Latvians. And with their nation in ruin, they felt they had been punished enough. Of course, there's never enough time in an 8-week course or in a 25-page research paper to cover everything one would hope to include. There's so much more to consider on this topic with regard to anti-Semitism, the role of other less noted nations in this area, such as the United States, the role of U.S. business, the American and British eugenics movements, to say nothing of those efforts in Germany. One area that really deserves further attention are the perspectives of the Germans themselves, if it were ever really possible to peel back the defensive layer of deniability and have some unmasked moments, perhaps in diaries, letters, or deathbed confessions, that might better reveal what they thought and why they did or did not act in the ways that they did. So, in closing, very interesting to get at some of those causal factors and what led to the so-called bystander activity and inactivity, but also really deconstructing that myth and finding a way to explain why that myth came to be and who benefited from its proliferation. Thank you.